Pro wrestling is an art whose athletes specialize in scripted confrontations. We all know this. What we often forget is that within this great organization, there have been a zillion men swamped with testosterone, with egos, weaknesses, principles, just like any other place in the world. And of course, this is not the best combination in the world for resolving peaceful conflicts. So in today's video, we're going to bring you 10 real fights between WWE athletes. Number 10. Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle. More than two legends of the ring, Lesnar and Angle are both decorated wrestlers, with one being an NCAA champion and the other being a literal Olympic medalist. So even though today they are clearly on good terms, it's no surprise that these two figures at some point would like to test themselves. Kurt Angle, on the Chris Jericho podcast, said, "Someone asked him how I would do against him, and he said, 'He's too small. I'd kill him.' So I walked up to him and said, 'Did you say I'm too small for you that you would kill me?' He said to me, 'Kurt, you're what? 215 pounds? I said, 'I'm 225 pounds. He said, 'Well, I'm 315. I said, 'Well, I don't have a problem. Let's get in the ring.' Later, Angle added that he got the better of the fight, but the truth is that he would hardly say anything else. So the real winner of that night will forever remain a mystery. Number 9. Sheamus versus Yoshi Tatsu. None of this is confirmed, simply rumors. But to be honest, this is such a random story that I can't see any reason why it was made up. A sweltering Florida afternoon, a few years back. You've got Yoshi Tatsu, Sheamus, and Ted DiBiase Jr., all shacked up together in some sun-soaked apartment. Now, Sheamus, the big, pale Irish bruiser, has taken it upon himself to play the role of kingpin in this little setup. He's swaggering around like he owns the place, probably thinking his Celtic heritage gives him some divine right to rule. But here's the twist. Sheamus has been dipping into Yoshi and Ted's stash. And we're not talking about money or anything major. It's a protein drink mixer. They team up, confront the big guy, Sheamus, who doesn't take too kindly to being called out. So, what does he do? He loses his cool, grabs that protein mixer, and hurls it at Yoshi. But Yoshi got that New Japan grit in him. Some solid amateur boxing chops too. So, what happens next? Well, let's just say Sheamus bit off more than he could chew. Yoshi lays into him, and it's not pretty. Sheamus, the big tough guy, ends up getting his clock cleaned so bad that he's practically on the verge of tears. Now, if this tale is true, and let's be honest, it sounds too wild not to be, it's a classic case of the big dog thinking he's the toughest, only to find out the hard way that size doesn't always mean squat. Number 8. Sheamus versus Sin Cara. If you heard that an Irishman was involved in so many fights, you'd probably say it was Conor McGregor. But this time, it's just Sheamus. It's 2014. Sin Cara is lying on a medical table, getting checked out by the trainer. Nothing serious, just the usual post-match wear and tear. But Sheamus, he's not one to wait his turn. He strolls in, probably fresh off a match, and throws out this snide little comment. Something along the lines of, "I'm the big deal around here, so get off the table, Sin Cara. My needs come first." Now you gotta understand, Sin Cara isn't exactly the type to let something like that slide. Maybe it was the way Sheamus said it, or maybe Sin Cara was just having one of those days. But he decides enough is enough. He rolls off the table, and before you know it, the two are throwing down right there in the locker room. And here's the kicker. Sin Cara, the smaller guy by a mile, apparently gets the best of Sheamus. That's right, he takes on the Irish powerhouse and comes out on top. Number 7. Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. Rewind to May 1997, and we're smack in the middle of one of the most infamous rivalries in wrestling history. Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels. These two weren't just rivals on screen. No, their bad blood ran deep, boiling over behind the curtains. For years, they'd been at each other's throats, both in the ring and out. But this particular night on Raw, things finally exploded. Bret Hart is in the ring, doing his promo, when suddenly, Michaels appears on a big screen and starts dropping the bomb. Listen here. Even though lately you've had some sunny days, my friend. Now, on the surface, it sounds harmless enough, right? But if you knew the score, you knew exactly what he was implying. Sunny days was a not-so-subtle jab at Bret Hart, hinting that he'd been spending some extra time with Sonny, the WWE diva who had gained a bit of a reputation backstage. In one fell swoop, Michaels wasn't just taking a shot at Hart. He was dragging his personal life into the mud, breaking the unwritten rule of wrestling: keep family and personal lives out of the ring, unless you've got the green light to go there. But here's the thing. Bret didn't even hear it. The crowd was too loud, the adrenaline too high. It wasn't until he got backstage, still riding the post-segment buzz, that someone clued him in on what Michaels had just done. And that's when the switch flipped. Hart storms down the corridor, finding Michaels, and what starts as a heated verbal exchange quickly devolves into a full-on brawl. Hart doesn't waste time. He grabs Michaels by the hair, and the two are rolling on the floor like a couple of barroom brawlers. In the heat of it all, Bret rips out a chunk of Michaels' hair, a literal piece of scalp, leaving the Heartbreak Kid with more than just a bruised ego. Number 6. Chris Jericho versus Shane McMahon, the 2016 Survivor Series. Men's 5-on-5 match was a spectacle. Undoubtedly, one of the finest elimination bouts of the decade. It was packed with memorable moments, including a brief but thrilling reunion of The Shield, much to the delight of the fans. But amid all the action, some viewers might have missed a real, unscripted exchange between Shane McMahon and Chris Jericho. Shane, caught up in the excitement of the moment, went off script and threw some genuine punches at Y2J. It wasn't out of any malice. Shane was simply caught in the heat of the moment. Jericho, though, wasn't one to let it slide. He responded by delivering a real kick to Shane's face, followed by another one from the top turnbuckle, snapping McMahon back to reality. Number 5. Vince McMahon versus Kofi Kingston. It's 2010, and we're cruising at 30,000 feet in Vince McMahon's private jet. Among the names that were in the air that day, there are Chris Jericho, John Cena, and of course, Kofi Kingston. The plane touches down, and as everyone's getting ready to disembark, Vince throws a casual jab at Kofi. Something about how Kofi just isn't getting over in WWE, you know? Not making the impact Vince expects. Now, Chris Jericho, always the instigator, leans over to Kofi and basically says, "You can't let him get away with that. You need to stand up to him. Challenge him." Kofi's not one to back down, so he marches right up to Vince and asks him straight up, "You got a problem with me?" Vince, never one to shy away from a confrontation, shoots back with, "Maybe I do. What are you gonna do about it?" And just like that, the tension skyrockets. They exchange a few more heated words, and before you know it, Vince McMahon dives at Kofi with a double leg takedown. It's a chaotic mess for a few seconds, until Vince, ever the showman, gets up, dusts himself off, and just laughs it off like it was all in good fun. Kofi's left there, probably wondering what the hell just happened, while everyone else is trying to process the fact that they just witnessed one of the most bizarre and unexpected backstage scuffles in WWE history. Number 4. Nails versus Vince McMahon. Enter Kevin Woltz, better known to the world as Nails. This guy who's fresh out of the slammer, or at least that's the story. He's not some reformed con looking to turn his life around. No, Nails is pissed, and he's got one man in his crosshairs, the Big Boss Man. According to the backstory, Boss Man didn't exactly play by the rules during Nails' time behind bars, and now that he's out, Nails is hell-bent on revenge. SummerSlam rolls around, and Nails gets his first shot, not at Boss Man, but at his buddy Virgil. And what happens? Nails crushes Virgil in a 4-minute beatdown. Survivor Series comes, and Boss Man finally gets his hands on Nails, putting an end to the feud, or so it seems. But behind the curtain, there's a whole different story brewing. You see, back in the early 90s, the WWF had this little habit of paying their wrestlers months after the fact, and when those SummerSlam checks finally hit the bank, Kevin Woltz is livid. He feels shortchanged, like the payday didn't match the punishment he doled out on Virgil. So what does Nails do? He storms into Vince McMahon's office, and this isn't some heated exchange of words. No, Nails goes full psycho. He shoves Vince to the floor and starts choking him out, hands wrapped around the boss's throat like a rabid dog that's finally snapped its chain. Bret Hart and Bruce Pritchard would later confirm this went down exactly as you'd imagine. chaos, panic, and then a pile of wrestlers and staffers rushing in to pull nails off McMahon. Number 3. Booker T versus Batista. These two were top dogs, but that didn't stop them from getting into one of the most infamous backstage brawls in wrestling history. The story goes that Booker and Batista threw down, and like most fights in this business, who actually won depends on who you ask. What's clear, though, is that Batista walked away with a black eye, and for a while, the air was thick with animosity. But here's the thing about wrestling. No matter how heated things get behind the scenes, the show must go on. And go on it did, with Booker dropping the World Heavyweight title to Batista at Survivor Series 2006, ending his 4-month reign as champ. Despite the scrap, they managed to work together after the fight, both on TV and at live events. Fast forward to today, and Booker's got nothing but respect for Batista. On his Hall of Fame podcast, Booker talked about how he'd give Batista a hug if he saw him now, praising the guy for how he's killing it in Hollywood. "He's freaking killing it," Booker said, and you can tell he means it. Number 2. The Great Khali versus The Big Show. It all goes down after a house show where Khali apparently borrows a move from Big Show's playbook. A chop to the chest in the corner, something Big Show's made his signature. Now, Show's not the kind of guy to just let that slide, so when they hit the locker room, he confronts Khali, asking him why he's stealing his moves. Khali, though, is lost in translation, not really getting what Big Show's worked up about. But Show's not about to have a calm discussion. He picks up Khali's bag and hurls it across the locker room, like a bull tossing a rag doll. That's the spark that sets off this powder keg. And before anyone knows it, these two giants are squaring off, fists flying. This isn't some choreographed wrestling match. This is a legit fist fight between two men who could crush most people with a single blow. They're trading brutal punches, and the whole locker room is watching, probably half in awe, half in terror. The fight only stops when Big Show, in a moment that almost seems straight out of a comedy, trips over a chair. Down he goes, and Khali, all 7 feet of him, gets on top. Number 1. Chris Jericho versus Brock Lesnar. The main event of SummerSlam 2016 delivered one of the most intense moments in the event's history, when Brock Lesnar busted Randy Orton open with a brutal elbow to the head. The impact was so real that it left fans and even some wrestlers questioning whether it was scripted or if Lesnar had taken matters into his own hands. Backstage, WWE legend Chris Jericho was fuming, convinced that Lesnar had gone off script and intentionally attacked Orton. Fueled by anger, Jericho confronted Lesnar as soon as he got backstage. Reports from that time suggest Jericho didn't hold back, pushing the former UFC champion against the wall. In response, Lesnar reportedly kissed Jericho on the forehead in a bizarre display of dominance. Fortunately, before things could escalate any further, Vince McMahon stepped in and separated the two, diffusing what could have turned into an all-out brawl. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've stayed this far, I ask you again to subscribe to the channel and leave a thumbs up, and that's it until the next video.